Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument is one of the largest marine conservation areas in the world. It's home to a rare mix of native Hawaiian cultural heritage and a diversity of wildlife. Since 1903, U.S. presidents and other organizations have stepped in to protect this mixed World Heritage Site. But monitoring vast marine areas for protection from illicit activities, such as illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, is no easy feat. At Hawkeye 360, we monitor commercial radio frequency signals, such as VHF marine radios and marine X-band radar. Using a growing constellation of small satellites and advanced analytics, this lets us effectively monitor broad geographic locations, including sensitive marine areas like Papahanaumokuakea, and more easily detect potential encroachment into exclusive economic zones for illegal fishing and other illicit activities, protecting time, resources, and most importantly, sensitive ecosystems like those found at the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, making the world a safer place.
Good afternoon. This is Congressman Salud Carbajal. Thank you to everyone in our ocean conservation community for your incredible work. I have the honor of representing the Central Coast of California, home to one of the most diverse marine ecosystems in America and in the world. In my community, we rely on the health of our ocean and coastline to sustain our economy and way of life. Currently, our oceans face unprecedented challenges, ranging from warming ocean waters, increased plastic ocean pollution, and threats of new offshore oil and gas exploration activities. The waters off the Central Coast of California include feeding grounds for numerous species of whales and dolphins, sea otter populations, thriving kelp forests, and they are home to vital commercial and recreational fisheries that generate $70 million in income and over 1,840 coastal jobs in California. I have fought to protect the region off our coast by supporting designation of a new national marine sanctuary. This would ensure we continue to be good stewards of these natural resources and maintain access for commercial and recreational fishermen. It is crucial that we ensure the diverse cultural perspectives from local and indigenous communities are represented to ensure inclusive access and opportunity. I'm proud to be working to advocate for the NOAA designation of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. This sanctuary would not only protect an environmental treasure, but also preserve Chumash cultural resources and sacred sites. I will also keep working hard to prevent offshore oil and gas leasing off California's shore. The Central Coast has experienced multiple oil spills, which cost millions of dollars to clean up and damage our environment, not to mention the damage to our local economy. That's why my very first bill in Congress was the California Clean Coast Act, which bans future offshore oil and gas drilling off the coast of California and the Central Coast. Once again, thank you for all of your hard work to preserve and expand access to thriving marine environments for our communities. I look forward to this week's discussion and engaging with you in this critical effort. Upward and onward.
Aloha, fellow members of Congress and staff, state and local government representatives, business leaders, scientists, special guests, and members of the public. It is a pleasure to join all of you during Capitol Hill Ocean Week. I want to thank the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation for hosting this premier ocean policy event in our nation's capital. For 2 decades, this conference has convened thought leaders from different backgrounds and perspectives to discuss issues that impact our ocean and our Great Lakes. I am grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this session, in particular, Eye on the Horizon, representing culture in protected waters. This very meaningful dialogue elevates the key voices of Indigenous and local community leaders to build a national marine sanctuary system that represents all of America and is inclusive of all people. It is fitting that 2021 marks the 15th anniversary of the Papahanao Mokuakea Marine National Monument. It is the largest conservation area in our nation's protected waters and one of the largest in the world. As a native Hawaiian and a fisherman, this is significant to me. Like other Indigenous peoples, native Hawaiians understand the importance of protecting our natural resources. In traditional times, complex community-based resource management systems called ahupua'a have thrived. Protecting our country's natural resources is an important priority for me in Congress. As Ocean Week kicks off, may we honor the efforts of everyone present to reveal core priorities for a policy agenda focused on sustaining our oceans and Great Lakes with justice, equity, diversity, and access. Mahalo.
Good afternoon. Good morning, depending upon where you're joining us. Welcome to Capitol Hill Ocean Week 2021. My name is Kris. I'm the president and CEO of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. And I want to thank both of the congressmen for providing opening remarks today. National marine sanctuaries and monuments conserve cultural and maritime resources that tell of our connection and reliance on the ocean and Great Lakes. And they safeguard natural resources that we all rely on for our livelihoods, subsistence, and well-being. Across our country and the world, efforts are underway to conserve and restore the lands and waters that we rely on. Last month, the Biden-Harris administration released its report, Conserving and Restoring America the Beautiful, which recommends a 10-year, locally led campaign to achieve the goal of protecting 30% of nature by 2030. I am honored to introduce 4 individuals working in their communities to center justice and equity in ocean conservation and cultural resource protection. Janine Ledford is Executive Director of the Makah Cultural and Research Center and Makah Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. Keola Lindsay is Trustee for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Violet Sage Walker is the Vice Chairwoman of the Northern Chumash Tribal Council. And Justin Donovan, who's President of the Society of Black Archaeologists. I'm going to turn it over to Janine to get us started today.
Thank you. As Kris mentioned, my name is Janine Ledford, and I'm here on the Makah Indian Reservation at the very northwest tip of Washington State. Makah people, or Kudich Ja'at, as we refer to ourselves, have lived in this Cape area since time immemorial, and our life has always been directly connected to the surrounding waters. The Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary was established in 1994 and lies just outside of our 5 traditional villages, along the Strait of Juan de Fuca, looking north to Canada, to British Columbia, and out on the Pacific coast, out on the open ocean. We're surrounded by nutrient-rich waters created by the dynamic intersection of the Strait of Juan de Fuca and the Pacific Ocean. The seasonal offerings of this rich ecosystem of marine mammals, fish, and other intertidal invertebrates have sustained Makah people for countless generations. Not just sustained us, but actually made us very wealthy. Makah people were well known for our trading that involved surplus whale oil, halibut, and fur seal to people in areas extending far along the coast and into Puget Sound. Land and sea are closely tied in Makah culture. After our reservation border opens, we've actually been closed since March of 2020, middle of March. We would certainly invite you to visit our world-class museum here in Neah Bay to learn more about pre-contact Makah culture. We have a very wonderful collection of pre-contact materials. So in 1855, representatives of our tribe signed the Treaty of Neah Bay, where they agreed to give up large tracts of land while reserving important rights to traditional resources. But the demand on resources driven by the new trade and new populations proved to be too much for the ecosystems to sustain, and local fish and sea mammal populations plummeted. This impacted Makah's access to primary resources such as halibut, seals, and whales. Today, many marine mammal populations have rebounded. In fact, the recovery of the gray whale population is considered a success story and seals and sea otters are also abundant. Yet our access to some of these resources is still limited. Through managed fisheries, halibut stocks have also recovered in our area, providing macaws and other commercial and sports fishermen the opportunity to harvest these bottom-dwelling flatfish. The Makah tribe continues to co-manage very diverse fisheries, including marine mammals, to ensure that these important resources are available to our people in the future. Our lands and waters have been managed and protected by Makahs for centuries, and now the tribe works in collaboration with the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary to enhance resource protection. By working together, the tribe and the sanctuary, along with other partners, will ensure that these waters and coastlines remain rich, vibrant, and productive for generations to come. Thank you, Kris.
Thanks, Janine. Keola?
Aloha. Thank you, Kris. It's a great honor to join my fellow panelists this year. The area I'm going to be talking about has been mentioned already in some of the earlier remarks, the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National. It's the northwestern extent of the Hawaiian archipelago. If you look at a map of Hawaii, most of them only show the archipelago actually extends another 1,200 miles. That area is now designated as a marine. It was designated in 2006. It combines the two names of ancestral deities, Papa, our Earth Mother, and Wakea, our Sky Father. And in the naming, it really calls upon the idea of life, of birth, of the patterns and processes of life. The region has tremendous traditional significance. It's an area where chiefs voyaged to kind of vest their right to rule. As those traditions changed, the area did maintain important significance to us. Our ruling chiefs continued voyaging up there into and during the modern time, we call it the dismembering of part of our. It became an area more known for environmental degradation, overfishing, bird. And in the early 19th century or 20th century, the U.S. put some of the first protections into the area for up there. For the last 20 years, Native Hawaiians have been at the forefront working with partners to develop conservation, including the National Wildlife Refuge, the Coral Reef Ecosystem Reserve, and the establishment of the monument really gave us the opportunity to remember a part of our traditions and culture and promote access and co-management of the area. And the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is a trustee of the area along with Commerce and Interior in the state of Hawaii to manage the area. So it's a really important opportunity, and I look forward to speaking more about it later. Thank you, Kris.
Thank you, Keola. Violet.
Haku, and welcome. My name is Violet Sage Walker. I'm with the Northern Chumash Tribal Council, and I would like to just express my gratitude to all the people that put together CHOW, and I'm really excited to be a part of this Ocean Week. I'd like to thank my Congressman, Salud Carbajal, for his opening remarks. And it's an honor for me to have a congressman that is so committed to the health of the ocean, and including some of his legislative acts like the California Clean Coast Act. We're really lucky to have the support and encouragement of our local representatives. 6 years ago, we were given the opportunity to designate a new National Marine Sanctuary. The National Marine Sanctuaries opened up the ability to nominate new sections of coastline. My family and my father are the designees of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. And today I'd like to ask all the people joining us from all around the nation and all of the people with NOAA and the Biden administration to consider moving forward the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary into the designation process as part of the goals of the Biden administration and the America the Beautiful, Conserving America, and the 30 by 30 goals. We believe that the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary exemplifies all of the 8 points, including the Indigenous opportunities for leadership. And we acknowledge that the administration has begun this process to include Native people in the management of sea, land, ocean, and fisheries, which we fully support and would like to, speak more about later. But for now, we are just super excited to be in a position where we're ready to move forward into the next steps of designation. Our proposed sanctuary would protect nearly 140 miles of coastline from the southern points of Big Sur all the way down to the Gaviota Coast in Santa Barbara. This area would include large concentrations of wetlands, estuaries, kelp forests, and giant ecosystems that include our migrating whales, our protected sea otters, and amazing bird life. There's extensive cultural and historical sites of significance that have taken us back nearly 20,000 years of Chumash occupation on the stretch of California coastline. There's thousands of archaeology sites prior to European colonization. The Chumash people were ocean-going, open water, navigating community of canoe family and what we call the canoe, the tamal, the Chumash tamal, which was our redwood plank canoe that we would open water navigate across to the islands, which most people refer to as like Santa Cruz Island and the Channel Islands and the Santa Barbara Channel. The ocean-going and seafaring ways of our ancestors have been reclaimed by our ability to reconnect with our heritage and the ability to rediscover our culture and community through the ocean and through these traditions that we've brought back over the past 40 years. It's necessary for us to join forces with other agencies such as NOAA and other agencies that are interested in conserving and protecting these waters in order to help better manage and in order to help tell the stories of our people. And so with that being said, once again, I just wanted to say, thank you all for being here and listening to us and talking about the reverence that we have for our culture and the connection that we have, the deep connection with our oceans and our heritage and all living things is our responsibility as a tribe. And it's our obligation that we have from our ancestors to share this with people so that people will understand the importance of our struggles and our commitment to conservation. Thank you, Kris.
Thanks, Violet. Justin?
Yes, greetings. Thank you, Kris, for the introduction. And I'm honored to be here with such distinguished colleagues on this panel. I am Justin Donovan. I am going to be an incoming assistant professor of archaeology and anthropology at the University of California, Los Angeles. And my work really has been focusing on the environmental impacts of the slave trade. And for me, ocean conservation has become really front and center as a result of the work that we've been doing, not just on land, but actually underwater. And so for the last 5 years, I've strapped a scuba tank on my back and began to engage in underwater maritime archaeology and really opening up the world of possibility to see what there is that lies at the bottom of these oceans that relates to African American history and African American culture, which we often don't think about when we think about our relationship to the land that we live on and our connections to the oceans and to the waters. So I'm excited to see how this field can begin to develop and expand and become more diverse. how we begin to think about what capacity building looks like as we grow the number of historically excluded archaeologists in maritime archaeology, and then as our understanding of what constitutes a cultural heritage site begins to expand as well. And I think it's important as, you know, an archaeologist that tends to focus on material culture, how we begin to think about our impact on the environment, not only our impact historically as people and as humans, but actually our impact while we're physically doing archaeological work. And what does it look like as cultural stewards to begin to think of the environment and begin to think of ourselves as environmental stewards as well? And so I'm excited to think collectively with this group to see how we can begin to blur the lines in our respective areas and fields. And as we can begin to collaboratively build projects and see what the future looks like for these next 10 years, so we can address this call and collectively, you know, answer these questions. And I'll stop it there so we can open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Justin. As everybody can tell, we have an incredible panel here today, and there's going to be a lot of rich discussion. I thought I would just start out by asking the panel, because I think people will be interested, how you actually got involved in the work that you're doing. And if it's all right, Violet, I'll start with you.
So that was something that happened in our community. We call it being voluntold, which is when your elder tells you what you do and you have to do that, and if they pass into the next world, then you're stuck doing that forever. And so that is basically what happened. Is our elders have told us what our obligation is, and we take those obligations for free, and we do that with absolutely no compensation, and we will do that until I remember the last time we went in front of the board of supervisors to talk about the marine sanctuary. I was pushing our elder in a wheelchair, and she was in her 90s, and she wanted to go and talk to them, and she said that she will be coming back until she passes into spirit. And so that's kind of where I come from, is we're told that we have to do this, and from a young age, I think 12 or so, when I was introduced into the world of scuba diving, I was told by my elders, this is what we need to take care of our ocean and our kelp forests, and we need to be a part of this. And I've been diving since I was 12, and I became a dive master at the age of 18. And I've been diving in Hawaii, which was one of my favorite places to dive, and out in the CHOW Islands and our kelp forests that we have here off the coast of California. But, when we talk about how we got into this, I think most Indigenous communities feel like it's an obligation rather than a choice. And so whether we're sick or not feeling well, or whether we want to or not, we have to jump on, calls and respond to emails and go to meetings. And, we don't have a choice not to stand up for our planet and not to stand up for the mothers and the ocean. And, it's a calling for us. So we will be here long after, a lot of people whose jobs it is, who, their term expires every 4 years or 6 years or 8 years, and we'll still be here, and we'll still be knocking on the next person's door. So this is, protecting the ocean and being a part of the ocean started when I was a child, and it's part of our history, and it's something that that we're obligated to do until we pass. And so that is something to be, proud of, and it's also a heavy burden for our people to carry.
Yeah, thanks, Violet. Justin.
Yeah, I got into this about 5 years ago from two organizations. One is Diving with a Purpose, and the other one is the Slave Wrecks Project. And so the Slave Wrecks Project is a project out of the Smithsonian's National Museum for African American History and Culture. And they've been tasked in documenting, identifying, and interpreting slave shipwrecks all over the world. And they were really interested in trying to build out more maritime archaeologists of African descent so that we can begin to take this work international. In addition to that, they've been working very closely with Diving with a Purpose, which is a nonprofit organization comprised mostly of recreational scuba divers who have, at this point, become professional maritime archaeologists with the amount of scientific training that they've gotten. And they've been working very closely with NOAA in Key Largo, Florida, in terms of helping them to document shipwrecks all over and look for some slave shipwrecks themselves and other aspects of African American history in places like Lake Huron and Thunder Bay. And those two groups came together and said, we have a vast underrepresentation of academics that are African American and maritime archaeologists, and we'd like to see about building out a program. So they certified me in scuba diving and tasked me and my colleague, Dr. Ayana Fluellen, with trying to come up with a program to build out a sustainable process. So we're working now to train African American archaeologists and archaeologists from the diaspora, actually. So we have some Haitian PhD students as well that we're trying to certify and build out so we can begin to take this on an international level. And that's kind of how I got involved in it. And then realizing how much heritage is underwater that we don't even recognize or know just, kept me going. So I'm here for the long term.
That's great. Thanks, Justin. Keola?
Yeah, I think, similar to what Violet mentioned, here in Hawaii, caring for the ocean as a cultural resource is something, and that responsibility is placed upon us early on. But for Papanamokuakea, how I got involved was shortly after it was designated a monument. One of the management elements is a Native Hawaiian Cultural Working Group that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs convenes and facilitates meetings of. And a friend of mine in 2007 asked, hey, can you come help me with the work of this group? I didn't really know too much about Papanamokuakea at the time. And it really blew my mind to, now in 2021, I kind of talk like it's something very familiar to me, but as well. And when she left the organization, she said, friend, I want you to make me a promise that you won't let this issue get lost in our organization, that you'll see it through and finish the work that has to be done. No pressure there, right? But I stuck through it and tried my best to do that. And it's been a huge honor and just something that I never expected, but will always appreciate the rest of my life. Thank you.
Thanks. Janine?
Yeah, I was a child. As a child, on our reservation here, we have a state school. There are 90-some% of the kids are Makah, and the tribe school have worked in real close collaboration over the years. We've had a school here since the 1930s, and we had basket weaving classes for elementary school kids. And so some women would come in, they were related to me on my mom's side, and teach us to make baskets. And, we use cedar bark, and we got to learn to make baskets as kids. And I just really enjoyed it. And then as I got a little bit older in elementary school, I was invited to participate in the museum planning project. So our cultural center opened in 1979. So for a couple of years before that, as an elementary school kid, I got to come up and work on the museum project and do replicas. And so I kind of was pulled into, working with archaeological collections early on. I mean, I was about 11 years old. And so I went away and actually moved off the reservation when I was in part of junior high and high school. And then during one of my summers while I was in college, I excavated on one of our other sites, not at Ozette, but on another archaeological site. So I just kind of stayed involved after that early involvement as a kid. And like the others were saying, sometimes, folks just, kind of pull you in ways that you might not even completely understand. Like the women who taught me how to weave were relatives of mine. They both lived till they were about 100 years old. And one of them would tell me, oh, Janine, you're a good basket weaver because your grandma Ada was. My grandma Ada on my mom's dad's side. So they would give like genetic credit to me. And even though they're the ones who taught me, like actually I'm doing it. You taught me, but I think it was their way of just sort of telling you have, stay interested and stay involved. And then because our tribe had worked so closely with universities and with the park, starting with the excavation at Ozette in 1970, or even before, we were a natural fit for applying to create a tribal historic preservation office here at Makah. And so, but interestingly, even before we assumed that authority in 2001, we exercised that authority. So if a project was going on, if there was a new building scheduled to be built on our reservation, we would be called in because we were, here at the Makah Cultural and Research Center. This is where we know about archaeology, so we would do the reviews and take a look at the project and make recommendations, sign off once we thought it was safe to move forward. And then later we realized, there is a formal process for assumption of that authority that maybe we should look into. But again, it's better to exercise, exercise that authority, whether it's technically yours or not. And then later on, we created a Tribal Historic Preservation Office in 2001. I've been working real closely with agencies both off reservation and on reservation. And so we've done some really neat things with paleo shoreline studies with the Marine Sanctuary. And we've just, moved forward on all kinds of proactive projects as well as, of course, reviews. And I would say my involvement began as maybe an 8-year-old and continued as a college student. And then just, by then you're just hooked. So, yeah.
Well, thank you guys very much for sharing those stories. Those were wonderful. I guess moving in, and this will be a question really for everyone, is as we think about the future of ocean conservation and being more inclusive and centering the rights of Indigenous and coastal communities in the work, what do you think it's important for us to acknowledge about past efforts? And in some ways, what should we learn from them as well? I'll start with Justin.
Yeah, thank you, Kris. I think this is a very important and key question, and I'm in a lot of conversations now, especially in archaeology, around this question of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And part of what I try to tell people and what we try to promote in the Society of Black Archaeologists is that we don't just want diverse people doing the same type of work. What we need to do is we need to recognize that when we ask for diversity and when we build out diversity and capacity, it's about bringing the entire individual and the entire community into it. And as a result of that, conservation practices, archaeological practices, all of those might start to look different. And I think as we recognize that, we also have to recognize that the communities we work in have in many ways been doing this work before any type of federal agency ever entered into these spaces. And so centering that, I think, is first and foremost. And a lot of times, that means before we actually do this work, it might take a year or 2 years just to get a lay of the land, or a lay of the water in this case, in terms of understanding how it is that communities have engaged with their waters, how they view their waters, some of the issues that are unique and nuanced to those positions, and then sort of moving on from there. So I think that those past efforts are very crucial and very important. And I'm hoping that those will then be able to help inform us, not only how we work in specific locations, but how we can take those lessons and begin to apply them into other areas. So for me, I think, having that clear understanding of past and present community actions is very important to this work.
Violet?
I was thinking about how far back our efforts went when you asked that question, and I was thinking it went back like maybe 6 years, and then I was thinking, no wait, it went back 44 years, and then it went back actually to 1969, and then it went back 200 years when the California tribes tried to ratify documents with the U.S. government. And those documents to cede the land here on the coast of California were never ratified, never signed. So technically, did we ever give up the right to our land here? And so when I think about 200 years ago and the Indigenous people here in California that went through the mission system and that fought through, there was a bounty on Native people in California, all the things that we've gone through, and you say, looking back, we can't forget any of that. We have to remember all of that, because to forget anyone, even if it was 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago, all the things that our ancestors have done to get us to this point today where we can be at CHOW. I think about, 2 years ago, I was a participant at CHOW, and I went to CHOW and I met, all of our representatives. And then 2 years later, I'm on a panel with CHOW. And so I think every day, I'm grateful for all the people in my family, all of our, relatives and all of our cousins and people that have done all this work for the past, 40, 50, 60, hundreds of years to be able to get us to this point where we can be here today. But I would say that, it's really important to remember that, things like the 1969 oil spill in Santa Barbara, which was, one of the biggest oil spill at the time, which has since been dwarfed twice by the Exxon Valdez and the Deepwater Horizon spill, but that started Earth Day. And our elder Palulakus always made sure that we did an opening ceremony for Earth Day. And so when people ask me, I try and make time for these things because, we've always done this. So it's really important to remember, the things that we've participated in and keeping our traditions going and using the lands that, we have our sacred sites on, like Point Conception or, Painted Caves or the Painted Rock, all these areas that have been used historically. We also have to continue using them and continue going there to keep our traditions alive, but also to teach people why they're important and to share our stories. So I think when you ask, about honoring what people have done in the past, it's not just our ancestors, but it's also our partners. We have a lot of partners, some of the biggest partners, in conservation, like the Sierra Club and Surfrider, and all these people that have got us to this point. Helped us navigate the government and the legislation and the types of support that we need from our local politicians. They have come with us, and so they're part of our journey too, and they're our partners, and so they've walked with us. And I think the overall arching theme with the sanctuary system and our commitment to conservation is access. So I think, access for our tribe, access for people to enjoy the beach and people of color to have access to, places like Malibu, and all these places that seem to be for a certain socioeconomic status of people. They need to have access to everybody, and not just the tribes, but to people that maybe are from the Midwest, and people that are from the Great Lakes, and people that are from all over the nation need to have information and access to these places that we love, and to the ocean especially, and to the science and technology that can reverse climate change. And so without teaching people from all over the world and all over our nation, no matter where they're from, the importance of being obligated to care for the ocean, the first part in caring is learning to love something. And you learn to love something by going there and putting your feet in the water and eating fish for the first time and playing and having fun. So I just think that, when we look back at everything that everyone's done, I think that, the most important thing is for us to remember that we need to use these places and enjoy them and love them, and then we can protect them.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Violet.
Kris.
Janine?
Yeah, I think that it's not hard to look back and remember where we've had struggles and difficulties in the name of conservation. And so, for example, the establishment of the Olympic National Park in 1938 created an area that restricted our treaty harvest. Our treaty actually, unfortunately, when it comes to harvesting on land rather than harvesting in the waters, restricts us to harvest, to gathering and hunting in open and unclaimed areas. And the establishment of the Olympic National Park, of course, was about conserving these beautiful coastal strip and some inland areas. And while habitat protection issues or habitat protection values can be similar between the tribe and the park, access to treaty resources, of course, are limited, and that started back in 1938 and continues actually to be difficult today. I liked what Justin said about we're not just, when we're bringing people, our own people from our own communities into these positions and to these tables where we're having these discussions, we're bringing in different set of values, not just training our folks to consider science that is sort of been developed outside of native constructs. And we do realize that we need to be at the table. We need to have our people trained in all sorts of areas of habitat protection and restoration and conservation, both on the land and the water. And let me see. I do know that we can, unfortunately, with tribes in our area, with our tribe in particular, we've had arguments sort of used against us as though they were legitimate scientific positions regarding conservation. You can look at what was done regarding fish in earlier decades and then regarding whales today. I mean, so for example, one of the arguments against our tribe's resumption of whale hunting is that it's a conservation issue. Well, it actually isn't a conservation issue at all. We reserve the right to take whales in the Treaty of 1855. There are plenty of whales out there. So using sort of a false conservation ethic or argument is frustrating, and then it almost would pit tribes against some of the very programs and positions that we do need to take regarding protection of other ocean and land resources. So there's a lot to remember that isn't even far in our distant past, and training our own people to be involved in the decision making, certainly is important and can result in a better future, I think, for us.
Thank you, Janine. Keola?
Yeah, I think in some of our experiences, in the stream conservation and research and policy, they didn't always integrate tradition and culture. Tradition and culture existed, but it was like a nice thing to think of, name of a plan, Hawaiian term, and that was about it. I think what we're seeing today is true parity between all these issues, and tradition and culture serving as the foundation of management. I also think the kind of conflict between a traditional account and what research and science is saying has been healed a little bit in Hawaii, where we're really, when people are given the opportunity to talk to each other and exchange and engage, we're seeing that our creation accounts actually align perfectly with what came way later, right? Science and research talking about how things evolve, right? So there's good alignment. And I also think past efforts didn't allow communities and peoples and native people to really define, what was in our case. Kapanamokuakea is 560,000 square miles. The bulk of that is ocean and reef. Early years of the monument, people were like, well, it's open ocean. That's not culturally significant, right? And we're like, what are you talking about? It's very culturally significant, and again, as time has moved on and those opportunities for discussion, I think we've come a long way towards really establishing a foundation of management. There's still work to be done in really establishing and integrating tradition and culture as the foundation into policy, research, and management. Thanks, Kris.
No, thank you. I just want to kind of pick up, I think, on something, Justin, you had mentioned that, what do we need to acknowledge as we change something going forward? And there was this deepness of saying you need to take time to engage with people. And so, and I know during one of our pre-calls, we had a kind of discussion to say, like, if we centered justice and equity in our work, what would that look like? And you said it would look very different. So I want to ask everybody, what is their vision for if we were truly doing this? What would it look like? And I'll turn to you first, Justin. Just...
No pressure, no pressure. Yeah, no, I think that's the beautiful thing is we can dream about what hasn't happened yet, or what could be. And for me, I'm not sure I can fully answer that question, but one goal that I'm trying to move towards is an area where we're able to recognize the contributions that we as human beings have made towards these efforts historically from all of our diverse perspectives, ways that we can blur these lines between what's cultural heritage, what's natural heritage, and how it is that we see and live on this earth. And I think, for me, one of the things that always comes front and center is what would happen if, instead of judging progress by our ability to land people on Mars, if we judge that same progress by, let's say, being able to see to the bottom of the Mobile River again. What would it look like if we devoted our time and effort and knowledge towards that? And I think if we did that collectively as a community, as a state, as a nation, and then begin to help others around the world begin to do that in their unique ways, I think we could really see some powerful, impactful change and really change the way that we live on this earth and that we live with the earth. So that's just a sort of short metaphysical answer for a very powerful question.
I like it because it's focusing on what's the positive outcome and then how do you get there kind of from that, with that vision. So, Violet?
I think about obviously we're here today, which is, something for us to, rejoice in the ability to see some of the largest organizations in the federal government, state and local governments making a commitment to, diversity and inclusion and equity. And when I was growing up, we didn't even talk about equity. You never heard that word. And so the way things have shifted in the past 10 years and the common language that we use now, it reminds me a lot of what we talked about, like that names matter, and how we talk, using our language, using different names, having different vocabulary to describe different situations. We're in an intersection right now, I think, is the best way to put it, between the intersection of environmental conservation combined with gender, because women and minority groups have historically been left out of conservation decision making. And so we're at, an intersection between, race, gender, equity, religion even. And I see that intersection of all of those things pushing us into a direction that I'm, proud to be a part of, and that I always think about how it's going to be better for the next generation. It's going to be easier for them to talk about gender and race and equity, and it's not something that they're going to have to learn like we have had to learn how to incorporate that into our documents. Like America the Beautiful is probably one of the most inclusive documents that I've seen a president and an administration create. And I'm just glad to be here to witness that. And it's my generation that is going to have to deal with climate injustice and the disparaging fact that marginalized communities tend to suffer the greatest amount of pollution and environmental damage, and also have the least access to resources to solve that problem. So I think that when we talk about environmental conservation, we have to redefine what conservation means. That word in itself doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for Native communities. Janine had talked about our lack of access to certain rights to hunt and fish and be a part of the ecosystem and manage the ecosystem. So I think just redefining our language and using different words and thinking about things differently is the first steps to creating equity and justice in conservation movements.
Thanks, Violet.
Thanks.
Keola?
Yeah, I think that vision this question ponders, for us here, it really takes Um, establishing a structure regularly brings everyone together to fulfill that, right? I mean, whatever word you want to use, conservation, management, it's hard work and it takes a lot. And for 15 years or so, the partners taking care of our area have engaged with each other every day to bring their interests to the table, whatever it might be. Obviously, in our case, it's Hawaiian interests, but we're supported in that effort by, I think, a structure that right, day to day, big stuff, policy, little day to day kind of things. We're all in it together, and we've created, an environment to manage an environment, that really promotes, everyone bringing everything to the table and decisions getting made. So, for me, I'm in our experience here, it's making sure that those voices, it's not just consulting or advisory, it's at the decision making level. That's been really important, for us, and I'm learning how it works in other areas to learn more about it. But for us, it's making sure we're decision makers, not advisors or consulted parties or whatever. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Keola. Janine, just we were talking about like what would a different future look like if we really did center justice and equity in the work that we were doing around conservation and cultural resource protection?
I think that that in some ways on our end it would look similar to what it looks like today as far as management of our resources. So here at the Makah Cultural and Research Center, we have 100% Makah staff. But when we partner with others in agencies and universities, we're very fortunate when we run into Native Americans within those agency positions or or other people of color. So I think that we do as we be the decision makers and not just those advisors. And an example would be, of course, early consultation. We work to manage sites within Makah territory along the coast, and we have a lot of archaeological resources along the coast here on the Pacific coast. And we have such a good relationship with the Olympic National Park that we're brought in the discussions very early. They don't develop a plan and hand us a letter and give us 30 days to respond. We go on hikes, we bring their superintendents and our council members to the table or to the site. And we consider that a pretty good relationship. We're equal partners in many ways, and that's the way that it should work. In too many other cases, again, you're just brought in to comment on something that is too far along to really, and then it ends up being a very time-consuming and expensive, redesign because of that late. And so there is a lot of room to improve. But of course, on our end, on our reservation, I'm very proud of the fact that we all of our experts are local Makah people. So that isn't something that we would change.
Now there was something that was a kind of common theme here, which was, and it was something a panelist mentioned in another panel, and it's just like, are humans part of nature? And to me, like, this shows just how important it is to put people in this whole equation as we think about it. You can't keep these two things separate. We have a question from the audience, and they would like to. The question is, what do the panelists see as the future of culture in protected waters, and what would be most helpful in each of their communities? I'll turn to Keola.
In our case, just the continuation of culture serving as the foundation for management of the ocean here in Hawaii. What was the second part of the question?
What would be most helpful in each of their communities?
Just recognizing that each community, in our case in Hawaii, while the foundation is there, each community has its own unique set of issues and circumstances that need to be addressed. So culture is going to be the foundation, but it's never going to be a one size or one approach works for everyone in conservation. So whoever it is trying to implement something just needs to be open to what the community is saying and work with them to find solutions. Yeah. Thank you.
Janine?
Yeah, I would say that conservation and establishment, say, of protected areas, marine protected areas, of course, must recognize Makah treaty harvest and land management, both on the land and of the water in perpetuity. So it's not just about accessing the area for traditional practices. Of course, we want support for canoe journeys and camping and traveling and singing and that kind of thing. But again, we've traditionally and sustainably harvested resources in our area, so we are not interested in those kinds of constraints.
Thanks. Violet?
Well, the easy question would be for me just to say what we would like the most is for the Biden administration to push forward the designation of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, and I could leave with that because I think we only have a short amount of time left. So that would be, if someone asked me what my wish is, then I wish for everyone who's listening to hear it again, to push forward the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary into designation.
I have to say, Violet, you are a tireless advocate for the sanctuary designation. We are right there with you. That's awesome. Justin?
Yeah, thank you. No, I think that this is a really important question. I think we're at a place now where we're looking at the waters as sort of the new foray into where we're actively targeting our cultural resources and cultural heritage. And for me, I think the future of it is actually thinking of historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, as building some of the best programs in these areas so that people from all over can begin to recognize and see what contributions can be made. And I think once we do that, it'll help to push this conversation forward about how do we preserve and conserve these areas and what does it mean to each of us. And then having that cross-fertilization of conversations. I've learned a lot from Kanaka Maui colleagues as well about ways in which you understand how the ocean is and works and how we live with it. And then there was a sort of side question about what can allies do. And I think part of that as well is also tying in this understanding of ways in which we can engage with each other, but more importantly, trying to shine light on the different aspects of heritage that exist out there based on the resources that we have access to. So I encourage all allies, recognize what kind of privileges and resources you have and begin to think creatively with colleagues around how we can use those collectively to make a change for the better. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. I think we have time for one more question. This is going to be a broad one. Is there anything that we're leaving out here? Is there anything as we talk about culture and protected waters that you would like to say, this is the key point? This is something that we either need to really put a pin in or we missed mentioning. And Violet, I'll start with you.
I think we could talk about this for the whole week. So when we talk about culture and the protected waters, I think we just have to really realize that, like, the water, my elder always says, when you pray, you should put your feet in water so your prayers are traveled around the whole world. And that really ties back to how connected we are. Even people, whether they're isolated in the Midwest, or people that are not by the ocean or not by rivers or lakes, that we just have to remember that their support and their caretaking of where they live ultimately affects the oceans and all the waters. So it's really important that we remember how all efforts of all people, wherever they're from, make a difference in the ocean, and that we're all responsible and stewardship, of the water and water protection, water conservation, and how important it is, especially if you live in California. You know how sacred water is, and this will probably be the last chance I get to say anything, but I wanted to reflect on one thing that you mentioned was how we look at diversity and inclusion. And when we talk about that, I'd like to say that, representation matters. And, seeing Deb Haaland become the Secretary of the Interior was like one of the most significant moments for me. And so I want to say, whether we're talking about representation in water or land, something like that is a historic moment for our people. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank, our congressmen and everybody for their support in making all this happen. That, representation and our representatives, being our biggest champions matter. And thank
Absolutely.
everybody else for watching. So,
Thanks, Violet. Janine?
Yeah, I would just like to encourage the agency representatives that are here. We know you're there. We can't see you, but we know you're out there. It's a bit of a funny feeling to continue to partner with tribes to define management goals and rely on science-based and context-specific approaches, of course, rather than target-based and politically defined approaches. So that's a message from our tribe. And thank you so much for this opportunity to participate.
That's a great thing. Justin?
Yeah, I would just encourage people to, the motto goes, act locally, think globally. And I think we can continue to do that collaboratively in our own environments. You don't need a big team. We can do it individually and then slowly build out from there. So I'm looking forward to building more and collaborating more with you all in the future.
Thanks, Justin. Keola, last word.
I guess let's not fall back on the path of legal authorities give us the ability to do this, so we're going to do it no matter what. Let's continue to be focused on it's our responsibility to care for our resources, to make sure our communities are healthy, and how can we best fulfill those responsibilities. However that has to happen, let's fulfill them and make sure we're leaving a place healthy and better than we took it over for the next generation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I want to say a huge thank you to all our panelists for their thoughts, their insights, and taking time to share their experience. We are incredibly grateful and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you.
thanks, Kris.
Yeah, thank you.